Before we can start with the interesting part, Mario's talk, I also like to make the normal announcement. Yeah, my name is Carsten Tellmann. I work for GData Advanced Analytics, and we are offering a nice additional evening event with a really nice dinner and some drinks, cozy atmosphere. So, like always, I like to invite all of you to join us later. So, if you're interested in talking to Mario a little bit more in detail about stuff from today or in general, you need a lot of beer to get him to talk. No, that's not true. But yeah, feel invited. Also, if you like to get in touch with people working in the antivirus industry, technical field mainly, then a lot of my colleagues will be there. So, hope you use the opportunity to visit us today. And yeah, it's the last time of this term that we have a speaker here, but of course we will continue this kind of event in the winter term. So now, please give Mario a warm welcome.
Right, welcome to my HackPra talk. So for disclosure, I have done this talk before, but it was never filmed, so this is pretty much the last time I can actually do it. But I think it's going to be fun. And it's going to be about Internet Explorer and why we're going to miss it, because it's going to be gone soon. Maybe, maybe not, but it's not being supported anymore. And over the time, I collected a list of items, a list of features that are like so fucked up that you would ask, like, why did anyone ever implement something like that? Like, why would anyone with like a secure conscience or with like a sane mind ever build a feature like this? And we're going to have a look at these kinds of features. So, quick word about myself. Thanks for the intro, Marcus. My name is Mario. I'm a postdoc here at the RUB and have a company in Berlin, where it is not as warm as here. Also, it's much bigger as a town, of course, and much cooler. And I have done some talks and have been to some conferences, wrote a couple of books, and you can follow me on Twitter if you want to. I maintain a couple of projects, mostly security related, HTML5 security cheat sheet, DOM Purify, and so on. And I think for DOM Purify, we actually just managed to get a paper into a conference. So hopefully it leaks soon on the uni website because it's really, really great. This talk is not exactly like educational because, I mean, you can learn stuff, but it's not about the learning. It's kind of a bit dirty in parts and definitely aggressive because we're going to have a stern look at Internet Explorer and what could possibly go wrong. And I would like to ask you to kind of not enjoy this as a documentary or like an academic talk, but rather as like a horror movie or something like that, because that's pretty much what it is. Just in general, if I'm talking too fast or too silently, just like make yourself seen, because that tends to happen. Just like wave or something, then I'm going to slow down and going to get louder. And other than that, just like buckle up and enjoy. So we're going to talk about Microsoft Internet Explorer, MSIE. And we wanna remember together those glorious days, like all the bugs and all those nonsensical features. And we want to think about whether we, maybe some of you are going to become penetration testers or are penetration testers already, how we can use these features to attack websites or other pieces of software, because we can still use them, and we still do use them. And in parts, they're like extremely useful, because with like small tricks, you get like a lot of new possibilities. You just have to know this particular one trick, and then all of a sudden a door opens. You're like, oh my God, I can do this? Seriously? And that's also what it's going to be about. So this is like the only educational part here. And I personally will miss MSIE. You probably caught the news that now there's like Edge, which is an incredible mess. Like, it's such a broken browser. But there's even a blog that's called brokenbrowser.com, and it kind of shows people how broken Edge is. And they stopped supporting IE. And it's still around. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, but it doesn't receive updates in terms of features anymore. Maybe security updates, but no more new features for IE. So there's not going to be CSP in MSIE or something like this. So we're not going to make fun of IE because that would be ridiculous. So we're not going to laugh about pictures like this, where this lady is apparently the opinion that it's a good idea to dress up as IE. And I think this is like Calvin Klein. I'm not really sure, but that's not funny. We want to talk about IE and what it actually is. So who remembers IE? Who uses IE on a daily basis? Who here is acquainted with IE? Like, I use IE almost on a daily basis. No one else? What kind of stuff do you use? Like Chrome? Firefox? Opera, nice, another train wreck. And so no one uses IE, that's good. Well, IE is a browser, and it's a fairly well-known one as well. And for many years, it was the most dominant, the most prominently used web browser. Like, everybody was using IE because you got it bundled with your operating system. in the very olden days, that was not the case. You had to go somewhere and download a browser. I'm not really sure how you would go there in the first place without a browser to download a browser, but then you received CDs to your home and then they contained the browser and you could install them, but they were not bundled with the operating system. And then Microsoft thought that this was a good idea to just like add the browser to the operating system, and the EU didn't like it, or like a couple of countries didn't like it, and then they sued, and it cost Microsoft, I think, about 900 million euros, because it was like apparently like abusing monopoly. And then in 2013, the same happened again with the EU, and it cost Microsoft about 561 million euros. So altogether, you have like 1.4 billion euros in penalty that Microsoft had to pay for delivering IE with the operating system. These days, no one gives a fuck about these things anymore because Chromebook, duh, and that's apparently okay. But back then it was really, really bad. And you can kind of understand that Microsoft was not really interested in keeping this thing because it was just so expensive and didn't generate any profit whatsoever. Just like people wailed on it, people hated it, and it cost money, and there was lawsuits. And people made fun of this. They called it like Chrome Downloader or something like this. Super not funny. They called it also Internet Explorer. Also, I cannot laugh about this. For me, because it's like a pure piece of beauty. It's one of the best browsers that has ever been created. And I'm going to show you why. So this is a picture that I really don't find funny because it's really unfair. Also, it's completely not representative for IE because it's great. And let's talk about history. Like, how did it all come together? Why? Like, what is IE? How did it develop? In August 1995, who was born in August 1995 already in this room? So who's younger than IE? Okay, fair enough. A couple of people are younger than IE. It's good for you. Gonna live longer. So version 1.0 was released in August 1995, and it was part of Microsoft Plus. And Microsoft Plus was like a paid add-on for your operating system. So people paid for IE1 to be able to use it. Just imagine that. Then in 2.0 was released in November 1995, a couple of months later, because no one bought it. And then it was free of charge. And it also supported JavaScript. So it sounds JavaScript-ish, right? Like JScript, JavaScript. Who knows the difference? Anyone knows the difference? Yes?
JavaScript is a Microsoft variant of JavaScript?
Exactly. Basically, it's an entirely different thing. So they saw like, hey, JavaScript is cool, but Netscape is building JavaScript. So let's do our own thing. Let's call it JScript. No one's going to notice. And they did that. It was a fundamentally different language with different object properties and whatnot. And they supported that. There was, of course, like sort of an intersection between JavaScript and JScript. But yeah, that wasn't the biggest one at first. So, well, nice try. It also supported SSL. So people were privacy-affine back then. And then already in 1996, 1 year later after the initial release, we got version 3.0, and it had ActiveX, and it had applets, both two awesome things that I really, really love. And then 4.0 came in September 97, it had active desktop, so IE was like so immersive that it would actually integrate in your desktop. You had like channels and widgets and stuff. Amazing idea. And then a couple of years later, there was IE5. And I do believe that IE5 is indeed, and I'm not lying here, the best browser that has ever been created, because no browser ever had so many features at once than IE5. Like everything was in there. Vector graphics, video conferencing, animations, timed HTML, DHTML, ActiveX, desktop integration, XML, like everything was in there. All the cool stuff that we know today that is supposed to be newish, that was already in there, just not specified. Like they just put it in there, they just like shoved it in like a turkey. And then in August 2001, the most well-known version of IE came out, and that is IE6. And IE6 was strange because it didn't really change much compared to IE5, so there was not that many new features. And legend has it that for version 5.0, Microsoft still had like tons of budget for IE. And they had like a total of about 1,000 developers working on IE5, like 1,000 developers. And they were like frenetic, they were like in the office, like sleeping in the office, under the table. They wanted to hack on IE and like push the web forward and everything. And then with IE6, they realized all the lawsuits cost a lot of money and that it's quite unpleasant and that it doesn't really yield. And some project manager made the decision that the developer team should be reduced from 1,000 to 10 people. So that kind of explains why IE6 is so controversial, let me say it like this. Then IE7 came out in 2006. You see that there's a huge gap, like 5 years. And it doesn't really do anything new. It's just like, yeah, IDN, wow, like internationalized domain names, great. Then IE8 came, people realized that there is like crashes and drive-by downloads, so it featured DEP. IE9 came in 2011 and was the first actual new IE because it supported HTML5 and SVG, and actual JavaScript. So it still supported the JScript. It also still supported VB script, but in addition, now also JavaScript. So what could possibly go wrong? Then IE 10 came in October 2012, more HTML5, more compliance. And finally, IE 11 in October 2013, they were supporting, everybody uses it, WebGL. So, and that was it. That's like the last IE. I mean, they still patch it if there's like a security issue, but everything else that is like new and fancy is going into Edge. And there's a couple of new features for IE on Windows 10 that basically integrate IE more into Edge and create like bridges. Like this page looks good in here and look good in there, better look at it there, and something like this. Basically, the feature development for IE is dead. It's just like lies there like a rotten carcass. So, anyone remembers this one? This was sort of my favorite when I was still a web developer. That was awesome. Internet Explorer for Mac 5.2, best browser ever. I have no idea how they did this. I think Apple was not as restrictive back then with like browser engines, but wow. Or this one. It's like unforgettable, like the experience, amazing. I had such good feelings. Like virtual machine for Java running in the browser and applets and everything created by Microsoft because they just didn't want to use the version from Sun because they wanted to build it themselves like everything else. It doesn't exist anymore. You can still download it from shady websites, but don't install it. Like maybe it runs on Wine, I don't know, like you could give it a try. Anyhow, I really like Microsoft Internet Explorer. It's not even a joke because for a couple of years it was seriously like bread and butter for me, and that was good. And I'm kind of disappointed to see it go away for a couple of reasons, actually serious reasons, because it's still a good enterprise browser and still is being used in enterprises. And there is like a vacuum now because large companies really have to think and consider what are we going to use now? This unsupported thing, or Edge, or Chrome, or Firefox, we don't really know. So that's kind of complicated. And so far no one is there to fill that gap. And I'm really sad to see it go away, and I'm really sad to make room for Edge because Edge is so horrible. And I kind of remember Internet Explorer like this crazy uncle that you had, where your parents would say, like, don't play with this guy, like, don't go to the cellar. And it's exactly what you did then, of course. And that was IE pretty much. So let's have a look why that is. This is also not funny. Don't laugh. Whoever laughs doesn't get beer. So how can anyone like IE? It's a good question, right? What's good with this thing that only a mother can love? So it's one of the browsers that kind of consistently ignored all standards. Whenever there was a standard, Microsoft made it so that IE would ignore them. If there was something that they liked, they wouldn't adopt it. They would just like create their own version, like with a VM, like with JScript, like with pretty much anything else. Like there's a huge catalog of features that they just like ruthlessly modified and just like put into the browser and just like said, yeah, our version is much stronger, it's much better. Let's use the Microsoft version only. This is interesting because it ignores standards, but it listens to people's needs. And they did that, like a teenager in midlife puberty. You might remember, me not so much. Or they created their own standards that everybody else hated, like VML, for example. Like how was it called? Vector markup language. So they created like a standard, a specification to be able to kind of show vector graphics in the browser prior to SVG being available. And it was the worst standard ever. Like if you really want to have like a horror trip, then you should go online. You should Google for VML and standard, and you will find like the standard stock from 1998. And you will be surprised how horrible this language is. Like they cooked that up. I have no idea how they came up with that stuff. So when they actually did the good thing and created a standard, people were like, no, thank you. So that was something. And what they also did was they just extended standards silently. So they have like a section on the MSDN that is not so very well known, but it's like a huge section with like literally thousands of subpages where they describe in detail how they deviated from the existing standards, page by page, piece by piece. This is like a fest for someone who does fuzzing because everything that you want to have is in there, but it's literally also that much. Like I spent years digesting through that and finding out what IE is capable of to find new bugs. And everything was in there. Everything is documented. It's all there. It just like needs to be found. They boycotted existing technologies. SVG was boycotted. Data URIs were boycotted. They just said, yeah, they're cool. They're a great standard, but we won't implement them. Bye-bye. And people couldn't do anything at all. Do you know this thing with the acid test? Does anybody know the acid test, acid 2? So the acid test is quite fun because it's a test that shows you visually how standards conforming a browser is. Because you go to a website, and on this website you see a smiley. And if your browser conforms to the standards, then the smiley looks like a smiley. If the browser doesn't conform to the standards, then the smiley looks like someone shot it, and you have a visual indicator that something is going wrong. And since it was visual, it gained a lot of kind of press attention back then, and then some project manager of Microsoft said like, yeah, just wait to this goddamn smiley, and it looks really, really bad, make it look good, engineers. So they made it look good, but then they said like, master, we noticed something. The smiley requires data URIs to work, and we don't support data URIs. And then the project manager said like, okay, then, damn it. Still don't want to support them because it's like really a lot of code that we have to produce. We won't make it. You know what? Only support the parts that the smiley needs. It's going to be fine. No one's going to notice. They actually did that. There's like huge blog posts about this. Like, imagine that. This is like cheating the benchmark. So next to that, they also implemented absurd technologies that you would never need ever. Like there was no use case for them, but they still put millions into developing them. And then you're like, and now what? Yeah, here it is, but what for? We don't know, that's up to you. You're the creative person. It's like, okay, let's ignore it. Like one example, for example, is XML data reduce. I think we're gonna have a look at that in a second, so I'm not gonna spoil. So what they actually created was like not really a browser, but like a software that is highly experimental, but then just like left in this particular state. And that was the de facto or standard browser for everyone back then. And today we're going to have a look at all these things, like at the 11 craziest things that they produce, which is like, oh my God, why would you do that? And let's see. Oops. So let's do it with a list, because everybody loves lists. And this is my personal list. So I'm pretty sure that there's like cooler stuff, maybe even things that I don't know about. But this is like my top 11. This is like the best stuff that IE has to offer. And that is now gone in Edge. So it's not like there's no items on this list where the features are still in Edge. So it's just IE and stuff that is not in Edge anymore. So I miss IE so much. The first reason is dock modes. I think a couple of people know this thing already. Like, who knows what the dock modes are? So this is like the best thing. Remember like the days when you were a front-end developer or something comparable and you had to create a website. So your boss comes at you and says like, create this website and make it look good in all browsers. So you create it and you open it in IE4 and it looks amazing. And then you create it, you also open it in Netscape and it looks not that amazing, but then you're like kind of finding a way. And eventually you kind of get it going and you have a good website and your boss is happy and it's gonna get published. And then 1 year later, IE5 comes out and you open that website with IE5 and everything is broken. It's like, what's going on? Then you realize that IE5 fixed rendering bugs that are present in IE4, but you worked around these bugs in IE4, so now your workarounds destroy the optics in IE5. And you're like, shit, so what am I gonna do now? Because this is kind of a dilemma, right? And then you like kind of fiddle around and then you find, maybe you find some code that is capable of satisfying both browsers. Maybe. Maybe you decide that you want to go with 2 different style sheets, and then you maintain both of them. Maybe you want to go with CSS hacks, like these underscores in front of properties and asterisks and whatnot. Maybe. Maybe you want to use weird comments or conditional comments or something like this. But this all sucks. And then maybe you find a way in whichever it is, and then you wait for 2 years, and then IE6 comes out, and the same thing happens over and over again. Like you realize that everything is fine in IE4 and IE5, but not in IE6. And the same happens with IE7. And the next thing that happens is with IE8, the same thing, and so on. So this is, of course, catastrophic, and this is not really fixable because when Microsoft fixes rendering bugs in the layouting engines, and you had workarounds for these before, then you need to find a way to kind of deal with that. So you have to produce double, triple, quadruple, quintuple code. Like there's no way around that. Unless Microsoft hears your calls, hears your cries, and gives you a feature that helps you in this situation. This feature is dock modes. So you have the possibility to use an HTTP header or a meta element to tell the browser, hey browser, I know you're IE11, but I want you to behave like you are IE7. Would that be cool? And then the browser says like, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm just gonna behave like IE7 now. And you may ask now, how is that even possible? And the browser says like, yeah, because I still have the old engine implemented. I just need to turn it on. And you're like, wow, wait a second. Oh, that could be bad because then all the old bugs are back. Yes, because that's the purpose of this feature. Oh, security bugs too? The not so bad ones, yes. The really bad ones, maybe no. And you're like, oh, this needs to be explored. So fact is, you have the possibility to instruct the browser with a meta element or a header to behave like a very old version. You can have it behave like IE5, IE7, IE8, IE9, IE10, and so on. That works. The only thing that you do is either set this header or use this meta element. But we're attackers. We want to do offensive stuff, right? So this is not really useful for us because we would have to be able to forge, to spoof those headers or to inject this meta element. Imagine a situation where you have a website where you can inject to, but you can't really turn the injection around. The alert doesn't pop yet. You don't really have actual cross-site scripting. But you realize that if the browser that your clients would be using were still IE7, then you had an injection, but since now it's IE11 days, you don't have an injection. And then it becomes useful to think, maybe I can kind of trick IE11 into behaving like IE7, and maybe then my injection works. And that's exactly what's possible here. So in normal cases, you would have to use the meta tag or the HTTP header, but usually you can't inject them. Or you can't manipulate the headers or something like this, and then you're sad. But there is a small dirty secret, and the small dirty secret is that when IE is loading a page in a certain document mode, let's say in IE7 mode, then every other page that is being iframed or included by this particular page will inherit the document mode. So you can have your own website that is on attacker.com. You can set your own website into IE7 mode. And then you iframe the victim website. And then the victim's website will also be in IE7 mode. Even if normally it would be in IE11 mode. And it's like, nice, that's sweet. So you have this particular constellation. And here would be the iframe on attacker.com that is setting itself to IE7 mode, and then it's iframing victim.com. And on victim.com, you have some weird injection. We're going to see a couple of these very, very soon. And then all of a sudden, they work because you force victim.com from IE11 mode into IE7 mode. And then everything behaves there like it would be IE7, which is awesome. So I wanted to kind of find a metric to classify these bugs in terms of severity, and I wasn't really sure what to do. I mean, we're in academia after all. And I invented the MBS, that is the Microsoft Internet Explorer barf scale. So the more barfing smileys we have, the worse this feature actually is. The maximum is 3, the minimum is 1, of course. So this gets like 2 barfing smileys, and it means it's pretty bad, but it's also not like super, super bad. We're gonna have 3 smileys, but not quite yet. So you can put other people's pages into different document modes and then exploit ancient injections that are believed to be gone. Remember when people, for example, were screaming in panic when they realized that in IE8 there is no CSS expressions anymore and you can't execute JavaScript with style attributes anymore? We never had this problem because it was always there. It was just in a different document mode. Just iframe the target page and all that stuff is back. So apparently that was not that well known. That's super useful. But there's a limitation, and now we're going to create like the starting point of a circle because at the end of the talk we're going to come back to this thing. And the limitation is that Microsoft had some weird idea of saying like, well, for some pages we should maybe not allow to kind of downgrade them to a different document mode. Maybe we should kind of limit that, kind of say the minimum mode you can downgrade to is IE8 mode because it wants to be like HTML5-ish. And that's exactly the reason. When the victim page has this particular element here, the HTML5 doc type, then you can't downgrade the page to IE5 mode or to IE7 mode, where all the cool stuff is, because you want to go to this mode. You can only upgrade it to IE8 mode, which is also still cool, but not that cool. And sometimes you want to have IE7 mode. It's like, that sucks. So what do we do? How can we get around that? And I'm going to tell you how we get around this, but let's have it be a limitation for now. So in some situations, we can only go down to IE8 mode and not to the really cool modes that we want to have. Reason number 2, MXSS, mutation XSS. Contrary to all other browsers, Microsoft Internet Explorer has a very, very, very individual and very, very unique way of parsing markup, like ways that don't make any sense at all. Because they try to be fast when all the other browsers didn't really try to be fast yet. And they did so by optimizing their parser and having like an intermediate step. So they basically receive the markup from the page, and then they parse the markup and pre-process it in a very specific way, and then they pass over the pre-processed HTML to the renderer to be a little bit faster. And this is, of course, interesting because it might mean that if we find security holes or weaknesses in the pre-processing, that we can technically take markup that is residing on the server or coming from the server and is perfectly sane and doesn't do anything bad, and have the preprocessor weaponize it for us. It's like, that would be cool. And that actually worked. We wrote a paper about this. This is really interesting. You should totally read it. And I'm actually serious. That's a good paper. And let's have a look at some examples to show how this actually works. So here I have markup examples. that in the eyes of the server and in the eyes of any other browser are completely harmless. They don't do anything at all. Here, for example, we have an HTML5 article element that is applied with an XML namespace attribute that is single quoted. The quote starts here, and the second quote terminates the attribute value here, and then the thing closes. The content of the XML namespace attribute is double quote, greater than, lesser than image, so that looks XSS-ish, right? But as you can see, nothing here can execute because it's actually like cleanly quoted. No breakage, no nothing. Like this will not execute anywhere. Fair enough. Here we have a P element with a style attribute, a font family. Font family is good because it accepts strings and it's like a shorthand property. And we see again like a properly quoted string. Single quote start here, then something weirdish like CSS escapes, but it's pointing at the double quote, hexadecimal ASCII table index. Here we have a semicolon apparently, then X expression alert 2, and then a half open comment, but then again a single quote. So this is nothing but a string and a perfectly delimited string. Everything is good. And then we have this chimera here, which is like completely absurd. That's like the percent element. So IE supports a tag that is called the percent tag. Look into this, it's super funny. I'm not going to spoil because there's like a lot of stuff connected to it. And again, we see an attribute and it's like perfectly double quoted. It starts here and it ends there. And in there we have something that is XXS-ish. But again, this doesn't do anything on no browser. And last but not least, we have a P element with a style attribute and the behavior property, which is also proprietary IE stuff. And again, we have a perfectly quoted string. So everything is good. But upon receiving this markup from the server, and then pre-processing it, for example, when inner HTML or something similar is being accessed, and then rendering it, IE changes it. And what comes out is that. So the first example is being transmuted into this monstrosity here, and no one really knows why. Not even Microsoft. We report this thing is like, what the fuck is that? And it's like, I don't know what this is. You tell us. And it's like, no, the guy who did this is already gone. It's like gone? No, he's just left the company. So apparently there's the need to produce like a huge XML namespace. I don't even know what it is. It doesn't make any sense. It's not valid XML. But it's there. Try it out. And then we can realize that apparently the default namespace is borrowing this double quote. Wait a second. Oh my God, this one here is being used here. That means that we actually close the element, we close this weird monstrosity, and then we free the image, and the image has a source and has an event handler, and then it executes JavaScript, just so. Although formally, it's like perfectly included in an attribute value. And that really works. That's actually not fixed in Windows 10. You can try this in Windows 10 and it still works. If it doesn't work, send me an email, I will show you how it works. Same thing with the P element. You can see it's being uppercased, because why not? Then we have the style attribute, then we have the font family, and then we have a double quote again. And then we have our double quote that is being taken from a CSS escape, decoded into the real canonical form, and then it closes the font family, and then the encoded semicolon is also decoded, and then we have an expression here that is capable of executing JavaScript. Again, we have perfectly harmless markup, and the preprocessor ruins it and turns it into something that is dangerous. And this is one of my favorites here, because we have the percent element. And funny but true, the percent element can have attributes, and they can be quoted, and they will appear in the DOM. But once the attribute value is a percent and the greater than, then it will actually close the tag and not become part of the attribute value. It's like, what? And that works up to IE9 or IE11, IE9 mode. And this also works in Windows 10 tag preview even so you can play with this. And that's actually quite useful because it also bypasses ASP.NET's request verifier and pretty much any web application firewall that exists. And last but not least, with behavior, we found out that they just remove the quotes. They're just like, quotes, schmotes, we don't need them. So they just kill them. So like, yeah, you wanted to use no quotes anyway, we kind of guessed that. So they're trying to help, but they don't really help. They just like activate the injection. That is horrible. So needless to say, this deserves like 3 smileys that are barfing with full power. And this still affects us in pentest, so we find these things quite commonly, actually. It's like one of the things that we find most, and to be most useful, is actually the percent element. So this is worth playing around with. Anyhow, reason number 3, scriptlets. Who still knows or remembers scriptlets? Remember the times when interactive websites were not called like Ajax or done with React.js and all these fancy stuff, but they were called DHTML websites, dynamic HTML? This comes from those days, because back then you had the possibility to extend existing elements on your website with additional functionality. And of course, you would do this with XML. So Microsoft would say, well, if you have this element and it's supposed to do stuff, for example, show a calendar or something like this, just assign an XML file, and this XML file contains XML and JavaScript, and then it gives the element the extra powers to render a calendar, of course only in IE. And they did so with HTML behaviors, or DHTML behaviors. But DHTML behaviors were kind of limited, and in addition, and no one knows why, they also had like a bigger brother, which is scriptlets. Because scriptlets did the same, but more powerful. And today, there is a very important aspect that is to be mentioned with scriptlets. You can execute JavaScript with DHTML and with behaviors, but you can only execute it if the stuff is on the same domain and if the DHTML behavior is delivered with the correct MIME type. So that's super useless in an attack because usually you don't have that power. It's not even a default MIME type, but something that you would have to manually add to Apache or Nginx or something like this. Scriptlets, however, don't have this limitation. They still have to be on the same domain, but they can be any MIME type. PDF, JSON, GIF, whatever. IE doesn't care. If it finds a scriptlet, it says like, well, you are technically an image, but you're also a scriptlet. I'm going to execute you. And that's quite nice. There was a challenge about that where a file descriptor wanted to find out how many people know about this trick, and he did so. The challenge is quite hairy. We're not going to go into all the details, but you can read about this. The slides will be available, of course. And you will notice that there was a couple of tricks that you had to solve to be able to pop JavaScript on this particular website. You had to inject into a title and realize something very special with the title that we're going to talk about in a second. And then you have to inject CSS, and then you have to kind of append like a slash to the PHP file extension. Then it imports itself and kind of thinks that the page itself is CSS, like relative path override, and a couple of other things. But the relevant part here, and since it's so hard to exploit, it only gets 2 smileys. The relevant part here is this. This is your injection, like anywhere on the page, opening curly, closing curly, asterisk, opening curly. Who's trusted with this particular sequence? Who knows this particular sequence? When a browser finds this sequence in a response that is supposed to be CSS, then the browser says, whatever stuff comes before and whatever stuff comes afterwards, this is going to be CSS for me. This is like pretty much like magic bytes or magic numbers for CSS detection, which is quite useful in many, many situations. So this is why we prefixed the whole thing with this particular opening, closing, asterisk, opening. What we then do is we include a behavior and we point to an SCT file. Here we make it easy, we just like point to a scriptlet, but technically what you would do is you would point to a GIF that you uploaded, or you would point to a PDF that you uploaded, or you would point to a JSON-P that you control, or something like this. Any content that you control, and then you put the scriptlet tags in there. And that looks like this. You have a scripted element and an implements tag. Of course, everybody knows the implements tag. And then we have a script element itself with the language specification, then the code that we want to execute. We close the whole thing, we close the scriptlet, and then it actually works. And that is still functional in IE 11 on Windows 10, and it's the only known way that is left to execute JavaScript with CSS only, pretty much with CSS only. And it's actually not that unexploitable. So we had a couple of cases where this would actually work. But I encourage you to have a look at this particular URL once you have access to the slides, because there it's documented and you can see all the steps. And there's also a lot of more cool stuff in this particular challenge. Anyhow, reason number 4 that is closely related to reason number 3, and it's called again, again. So when we go back to the slide here, we would notice that there is a challenge that kind of asks us to do something impossible, because the injection that we have in this particular challenge is going inside a title element. When you inject into a title element, there's like nothing you can do. You can inject whatever into this title element. You can't do anything in there because it's a jail. It's like C data in there. It's not being parsed, whatever is in there. It becomes document title. So if you have the privilege of, for example, execute or injecting a script element into the title element, it's not going to execute. It can't, because it's a title. It's actually by spec, by standard. You would have to kind of close the title. But if, for example, the slash or similar characters are being blocked, then you can't close the title, you can't escape it. It's like the perfect sandbox. Whatever you throw in there, you're safe. However, that's not true, at least not on IE. Because IE does something very, 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 very special that no other browser does, and it's absolutely unique and extremely useful. And it does twice what other browsers do once. It's like, okay. So imagine you're a browser, and your user sits in front of you and says like, hey browser, get me that website. And you make like a nice GET request to the server, and the server responds and says like, here's the stuff. And you're like, oh, nice, all the markup, all the response body, let's start parsing it. And then you start parsing it, and then you parse from the top to the bottom, and then you're done. You say like, hey, user, I'm done. Here's the stuff from the rendering engine, whatever. And your user is happy, and everything is good. Not IE. Not IE. IE parses twice. IE says like, all right, let me parse. Parse. Oh, there's a meta element. Let me check the information from the meta element and note it down. And let's keep parsing. Oh, another meta element. Let's note that down as well. All right, no more meta elements. Let's check what I noted down. 2 things from meta elements. You know what? Let's go up again. Consider what I noted down about the meta elements, and then let's parse again with this information we're in pocket. Say, what? How does that make any sense? Let me show you an example. Here we have a website that contains a plain text element. Like the plain text element, similar to the title, is an element that can't be used for anything because it turns everything into plain text. There's no parsing in there. It's even so strong that it turns its own closing tag into plain text as well. So it's the only element that you can't close. Like whoever came up with that, I don't know, try it out. You can't close this element. It's impossible. Like this will also be plain text here, and then, yeah, bye-bye. So then you have, for example, the plain text element, and this is, of course, plain text, and this is plain text, and then you have this garbage here, and you see this garbage is like, nah, this doesn't do anything, and shouldn't do anything. You see the L, and this like stuff here, and another L coincidentally, and another N here, another N here, so, and these are also the same. That's strange, and here's an A. What could that possibly be? If you take this bit of information, if you take this piece of markup, and you open it with IE, you will see a script alert 1. It's like, what? But you will not only see that, you will see this. Like garbage, more garbage, and then script alert 1. It's like, how is this possible? Well, it's very well possible if you consider what I said with the double parsing. IE parses is like, oh, plain text, I don't really care, no context. Ah, meta element. Let's remember that information. Char set is supposed to be code page 875 from the good old IBM days. Other stuff, garbage, other stuff, done. Let's go back up again, remember what kind of char set we have collected in the meta element, and then parse the whole thing completely again with that char set and not with ASCII. That, of course, will turn this into garbage, and this into garbage, and this into garbage, and this into script. So that perfectly explains why we have garbage here, and garbage there, and garbage here, and here the garbage ends, and then we have a script element. And in this particular char set, the lesser than is at the uppercase L. And the greater than is at the lowercase n. So you can see opening, slash, closing. This is script, and this is supposed to say alert 1. So this is a char set that you can nicely use to trick any existing server-side filters, because they would say, well, I don't have any problem with an uppercase L, and why the hell would I? So I'm going to leave it through. I'm not going to escape or encode or do whatever with it. But then the browser says, like, yeah, but technically it's CP875, let's execute it. And that gets you cross-site scripting then again. So well-deserved 2 barfing smileys. Reason number 5, I hate this reason. It's like the worst. You're going to know soon why I hate this so much, because it stole a lot of my time. And like the coolest story I have for this presentation has been destroyed by EML. But let's see this at number 11. So EML, who knows what EML is? Message RFC 822. It's like basically multi-part messages, right? Like you get an email that has like embedded stuff, and then you store it, and then it's like message RFC 822. It's basically the possibility to store multiple documents in one document, become that document be a multi-part message, and have all the binary resources be self-included. No one really knows why, but IE supports this in full. And you can open any EML file or MSG file on a web server, and IE will say, oh, that's message RFC 822, let's open it as that. And that's quite nice, because you can have your entire web application in one file, because IE parses that. And it's amazingly useful for cross-site scripting. Here's what you can do. I just get 1 barfing smiley, because it's not that bad. But if you have this particular page, this particular response body on your server, and you deliver it with a file extension EML or MSG or something like this, then this will, of course, execute JavaScript. Because it would say, well, this is my header, and yet another header, and a content transfer encoding, and then carriage return line feed, and then the actual response body that we have here in base 64. And of course, that's JavaScript. Like, who wouldn't execute that? Well, anyone but IE. Anyhow, or you can also use quoted printable, because why not? And there is one more thing, because this is like, it seems quite unuseful. But there is one more thing that you can do with email, but we're going to talk about this later. So for now, it's like one smiley. It's going to become 3 soon, but this is just like one smiley, so let's stay tuned. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is actually quite good. So a couple of years ago, one of our clients asked us to audit a rich text editor. And rich text editors are like disgusting pieces of JavaScript, like tons of JavaScript and functionality and feature switches and whatnot. They're hard to audit. And I had a look at the code. And I noticed something weird because in the code, there were some parts that were like made for IE, and they featured an if element, like lesser than, if, greater than. It's like, what? And it had an attribute, and the attribute was like if expr, like the attribute was like expr, like expression, just expr, and then some stuff in there. It's like, what is this? I've never seen this. And I tried to Google or Bing or whatever, like find it, and like try to search for if expr. There's no way of actually finding this. But I wanted to know what it is, and eventually found a forum from 1999 where a couple of people were talking about this. And one of them was saying, yeah, this WDXSL is really awesome. I love this new expr attribute. And I was like, what is this? Where is this? How is this possible? And one of them had a link, and this link was pointing to documentation. And I clicked that link and was really excited. And of course, the page was down. It was pointing to some old Microsoft website. I was like, shit, I want to know what's going on here. So I checked in the archived version of the MSTN if they still had it, because they have their own archive. Of course, it was gone. And then I checked on archive.org with the Wayback Machine, and they still had it. So I clicked on that page, and what opened was like the archived version of like an ancient documentation page from Microsoft. They still had like a headline image where there was like an old CRT monitor, like an old CRT display on there. I was like, this is the good place. When you see CRT in the docs, then you know you're right here. And indeed, they were talking about if expr. But they also talked about something else. They basically talked about, well, a couple of people are right now cooking up XSLT. And that's cool. But we, Microsoft, we want to be faster, we want to be better, we want to be awesomer, and we want to kind of implement this before it's even done, just to realize that a couple of things are missing for us, so we build them ourselves in a non-standardized way. So, okay. And they did that, and they created these two things. The first thing that they created was not the if element, because that is already there, that already exists in XSLT. But it doesn't exist with an expr attribute. It does exist with an expression attribute. That's the standard, but not with expr. It's like, what is this? And I also found that they supported an eval element. So you have an element that is called eval, and you could put code in there, and then it evals. It's like, what? Seriously? Who needs that? No one. And this is how it looks. You have a style sheet, and you have a template element in there, and then you have an eval element, and then you create an active X object reference to an HTML file that gives you a window object, and then from this window object you have the possibility to call alert, and then you're like in the window context, and you can do whatever you want. Or you use if expr, and you could just also put like random JavaScript in here, and it will execute. It only works in the older document modes, and it's not that super useful in pen tests, but it's super useful to crash IE. So if you're still looking for crash bugs, there's the place to look. And I give it just one barfing smiley because it's more like, what is this? So you can't really do much damage with it, but it's actually quite fun. And I encourage you to have a look at standards and at implementations from Microsoft that are created in similar ways, because they do that all the time. They take something that is like new and hot, and then they implement it halfway, and they're like, something is missing. Yeah, because it's not done yet. Yeah, let's implement this ourselves, and then we have the mess. So this is like pretty much a picture book explanation on how this process actually works internally. Reason number 7, that's really good. Visual Basic script. I actually added something for this slide for this particular event because it's just so good. As mentioned, IE supports 3 scripting languages, at least, like 3 scripting languages we know of. JavaScript, JScript, and Visual Basic Script. And no one ever needs Visual Basic Script in a browser. There's absolutely no need for it, like zero, absolutely not. Not a single website that I know uses Visual Basic Script. Well, maybe some, but they don't deserve to be online. Anyhow, like you don't need this in a browser. There's no reason for it. And have you ever seen VBS? Who has ever written VBS? Who has ever written VBS for non-malicious purposes? One person, excellent. Good job. This language doesn't make any sense because everything there is different, like everything. Comments are different. String concatenation is different. Labels are different. String delimiters are different. Everything is different. Event binding is different. They have their own stuff for literally everything. They don't follow anything that is present in JavaScript or JScript or whatsoever. Everything is different. They even have their own objects and their own literals. So when you, for example, have a VBS file and then you type the hash character and then 1/1/1 and again hash, then you have a date object. It's like, this is unique. I've never seen this anywhere before. We use it just for Excel macros and stuff like this. And you can do stuff like that. You can basically take a script element and you say like, hey, script element, I want you to use VBS. And then it's say alert space 1. You might say like, this must be a typo. It's like, no, that's not a typo, because A, in VBS you don't need parentheses because they're implicit. And B, it's case insensitive, fully, like completely case insensitive. You can call it like uppercase alert, or everything is like lowercase or uppercase or whatever, mixed case. No one cares, like the language doesn't care. So, okay, interesting. Or you can bind events, and you would do so by saying sub window, so that would be like the window object that you want to bind to, and then as a separator between the object you want to bind to and the actual event, you would use the underscore. And then you need parentheses. Here you need them, of course. I mean, that's clear. And then alert2, and then end sub. It's like, okay. Or you could do something like this, like eval top location hash, and then you have like location hash that is automatically containing the hash character, and you throw this thing into an eval. And then you have here a concatenation, and then alert3. So this actually evals because it's a date object that you concatenate the return value of alert into, and then it executes. So this is like nuts. But this is kind of useless. You never really use this in the wild, so it just gets one smiley. But I'm so startled about this and so worked up about this that there must be more, right? And of course there is more. Because consider a different scenario that you quite often probably have in web application penetration tests. Consider the scenario where you inject into a string somewhere in JavaScript and you can't escape it. There's two tricks, like two very nice tricks that you can use here. The first trick is here that you can turn the rest of the page into executing VBS instead of JS, even if it's meant to be JS. By having any element that is capable of executing JavaScript, like for example, like let's take the body that has an onload attribute, like an onload event handler, and then does whatever thing, like something legit here, and then you inject a language attribute, like super harmless looking, just the language attribute, and they say like, hey, you're supposed to be language VBS. That then means, if that works, if you can pull this injection off, that the rest of the page, every other script element, is automatically also executing as VBS. Unless it has a type attribute that says, hey, I'm a script, I have a type, my type is text JavaScript, and that's what I do. Then it doesn't work, but it doesn't have that type, then it will work. The entire page will be run in VBS then. And nicely, the specification kind of says, hey, you can leave away the type attribute. It's just like, you don't need this. Like, just leave it away from script elements. Like, cool, that's helpful. Because that is kind of enabling exactly that. And we have this then and when. We had it once with a large German mailer, and that was really cool to kind of carry it out like this. Because we had the possibility to change the rest of the page to VBS and then do stuff in here. But now the interesting question is, like, what is that stuff? What is the stuff that we do in here? Here we have the injection. There's a couple of things we could do. You could stop the string and just like start new code afterwards with injecting a double quote. Let's assume this doesn't work. We could close the script element and start new HTML. Let's assume this doesn't work. We could do this magic thing with a comment and the opening script tag and then kind of abuse the comment behavior that is specified in HTML5. But let's also assume that this doesn't work. Let's assume we can't really break the string. We can't get out, but we still want to kind of make it happen so bad. VBS will help us. Because in VBS, everything is different. If we manage to set the rest of the page to be parsed as VBS instead of JScript or JavaScript, then we don't have to break the string. The string breaks itself. Because in VBS, the alleged backslash that is being used by the server to escape our input doesn't escape. Because escaping is done differently in VBS. Escaping in VBS is done with double quote, not with backslash double quote. So here the string terminates. And then we use an ampersand to concatenate. Then we call the alert. And then we just use a comment to close the whole thing, and that's it. So we execute from a string that hasn't even been broken just by changing the language somewhere else in the document. And that's like a clear triple barf with full lung power, because that actually works in many situations and is quite nasty. I have, however, bad news, because Microsoft issued the new technology preview for IE and Windows 10 a couple of days ago, and they announced that VBS is now dead, like dead. It's not even in IE 11 anymore, and we tried, and so far we couldn't resurrect it, which really sucks. I'm pretty sure that we're going to find a way where it still would work, but so far it seems to be gone. So I'm not really sure. So the moment when this tech preview becomes the release version, so in 1.5 years or something like this, then maybe this doesn't work anymore. So seize the day and see what you can find, because now is the time. Reason number 8. Oh, this is good. How much time do we have left? Oh, it's okay. CC on, or at CC on. Who remembers at CC on? Conditional compilation. One person. Nice. Good job. So this is like messed up. And I don't know why they have this. On the documentation, like in the MSDN, they show some example code where they say, well, sometimes you want to differentiate between JavaScript code for 16-bit operating systems and 32-bit operating systems. Like, what? Who wants to do that? No one. It's like my grandparents did that, but I don't do this anymore. I'm 36. So it's like there's no need for this, but they still support it. It gives you the possibility to turn the script execution flow into a different state. And then not script is being executed anymore, but something else, like something from the depths. And it looks like this. So imagine you have a page, and the page again, of course, is being switched into an older document mode. We know we can do this via iframe here. I'm lazy doing this via meta element. And then we have this construct here. On no browser, this will execute, because on no browser, this is anything else but a comment. You can see we have a script element here, we have the double slash, and then it's of course commented. There's also no hidden new lines or paragraph separators or line separators or other stuff in there. It's just a comment. Not for IE. Because IE says like, well, there is a comment. But actually, it's not a comment, because the comment is directly being followed by an at character and then the sequence cc_on. That means that it's not a comment, but that IE will kind of open like a small virtual machine internally, says like, well, let's do stuff in here. It's not JavaScript, it's not JScript, it's not VBS, it's something else. It's like some kind of weird language. And as you can see, this language consists of very interesting operators and constructs. For example, we see here at if, or at elif, and then at end. And if you say at if1 to make sure it's always true, you can execute JavaScript in here. And then elif 0, which is never true, and then you end the whole thing. It's like, okay, that's maximum weird, but still interesting, because what is this thing that is running in here? And we played with this, of course, back then, wanted to find out what is going on, how useful this actually is. And it turns out that it's quite useful in penetration tests, because inside a condition that's never true, you can do whatever you want. You can produce syntax errors and parser errors and have stuff in there that the JavaScript engine would never be able to execute, because it's not JavaScript, it's something else. So this example here actually works. You have a double slash to initiate the comment, and then you have the CC on, and after the if 0, you can do absolutely whatever you want. You can have HTML in here, XML, binary data, anything. The only thing you can't have in there is, of course, an empty script, closing script element, because that would close the actual script element. But anything here is being ignored. In JavaScript, it would immediately throw a syntax error and ruin your injection. And we had the situation multiple times that we kind of had an injection here and another one here, but the stuff in the middle was ruining it. But with this trick, no problem at all, because you just turn the CC on and say like, yeah, if 0, and then you have all the stuff that ruins your injection. And then at some point you terminate and you do the rest, and then you're done. Quite useful. And then at some point, we realized that the documentation was lying, and that the documentation was basically saying, yeah, you need a comment, and you need an at, and you need a CC, and you need an underscore, and you need an on, and then we have this conditional compilation turned on. And then somewhere in the documentation, somewhere else, it says like, yeah, but actually, you don't really need all that. The only thing that you need is an at. It's like, what? Seriously? Yeah, you just need the at. Then we automatically turn CC on. Okay. So I tried it out and realized, okay, you can indeed just like in the middle of a script, you can say at, and then at set, and then at a equals, and then look at this. Like, look at this and explain to me how the parser works. Like, it must be some kind of weird dictionary. It says like, oh, yeah, and now false. Okay, something else must happen now. Because there is no trickery between those two. It still pops the alert, but there's nothing in between. So I have no idea how this machine works, and no one at Microsoft anymore either, because it's just like far too old, and no one knows anymore what this actually does, and no one wants to touch the code, quite understandably. So this is actually quite useful. So whenever you have an injection that you can't turn around because it's somewhat messy, and something in the middle turns it around or destroys it for you, try at CC on, or try at set, or something like this. Try to create a condition by just using at if 0, and then maybe that does it already. The error messages will tell you. Oh, this is one of my favorite reasons. This is one of the most dangerous reasons, because this they didn't fix, at least not sufficiently, because they eventually gave up and said like, let's just not do it anymore, like generally. And that is WMP. Who knows what's behind WMP, like this acronym? The Windows Media Player. Everybody's best friend. Best video player of all times, with so many awesome features, like a connected store and libraries and whatnot. Anyhow, you could embed it into IE, you can embed it into websites. So you could have a website and would load Windows Media Player, and the only thing that you needed was an object element. And after some time I found out that it's possible to kind of also receive and send JavaScript events to that video. And that was the only useful thing that I learned, not in this university, but in my former university in Friedberg, was that there's ASF videos, and that ASF videos can have like separate files that give like chapter information or something like this. And I remember this, like, wait a second, ASF chapter information, they execute JavaScript, maybe you can find crashes with that. And then I kind of stumbled upon this documentation, was like, oh my God, what is that? And it turns out that it was like a hornet's nest, because there are so many things and so many crashes, and this is so fundamentally, absolutely 100%, essentially epochally broken. So let's have a look at this. The only thing that you need to do is you create an object element. And you give that object element an ID, so the JavaScript would be able to know it. And you give it a class ID, so it knows what it is. Basically, somewhere in the registry, it says like, hey, I'm the media player. So you open the website that contains this, and the media player shows. And then you have the possibility to all of a sudden do very crazy stuff that you can otherwise not do ever, anywhere, at all. Because you can still execute scripts, but you can give the script element attributes that are not in any spec, like they don't really exist. It's the for attribute and the event attribute. With the for attribute, they start to get to know each other. For player, ID player, that's good. And the event is actually the event that is emitted by the video that is being played here. So if your video contains errors, or is a bit wonky, or stops in between, or does something, or changes language, or changes volume, or something like this, then the player emits JavaScript events that can be caught by the website and then processed and then given back to the player. Like, this cries use after free louder than anything out there. Like this, and it is, like this is catastrophic. And whenever you want to find crash bugs in IE or train your fuzzer or something like this, have a look at this, because it's really, really yielding still. And if you have a very close look and look for interesting browser behaviors, then you will realize that there's also something that shouldn't be there. And that is this particular syntax here. Has anyone ever seen this particular syntax using 2 colons to kind of bind events in JavaScript? Because you shouldn't, because it's like forbidden. It's like the forbidden city. You can't go there. Did you ever notice that there's like ECMAScript 1 and ECMAScript 2 and ECMAScript 4 and ECMAScript 5 and ECMAScript 6? But everybody kind of forgets about ECMAScript 4. And that's actually true. They kind of canceled it. It's like, oh, we fucked it up. we can't publish this. This is impossible. So they did ECMAScript 4, and they came quite far. And Firefox had a lot of implementation. They, for example, implemented ECMAScript for XML, which was like a weird syntax that you can now find in React.js with JSX. And they also implemented like a novel way of binding events. And guess who implemented it very quickly? Yes, that's right, that was IE. This is like, yeah, let's implement that before it's even specified. And it's indeed the double colon syntax. And here in this little window, here in this little niche, you can actually use it and play with it. And yeah, it's very crashy. And whenever you kind of have a nice injection, but there is a web application firewall in your way that has a look at the JavaScript that you want to inject, or like an IDS or IPS system, play with these things, play with these artifacts, because they're very much likely to get you through. If you ever test against the JavaScript sandbox, and there's a couple of them out there meanwhile, play with these things, because the sandbox doesn't see, doesn't know them, doesn't react them, doesn't bind them properly, doesn't wrap them, and all these things. So this gives you a lot of interesting features and a lot of interesting surface. Almost the last reason. Reason number 10, VML. I talked about this already, vector markup language. And yes, they created their own vector markup language. Do you know the anecdote behind this with like SVG, how SVG was created? So SVG was supposed to be the love child between PGML, Precision Graphics Markup Language, and VML, because back then they had 2 vector languages, PGML from Adobe and VML from Microsoft. Everybody loved PGML, and everybody hated VML. But it was obvious that Microsoft was trying to push this language and kind of leave it there and kind of not have it die. So the W3C says like, hey guys, can we not just like kind of make a third language that kind of has the best of both other languages, and then you delete yours and we just have one so developers are happy? And then they did that, and then we had 3 languages. And the fun part was that they wanted to take the best parts of both languages and smush them together. So nowadays, SVG is 95% PGML and 5% VML, because they just had pity. This like we can't do like 0%. We have to kind of pick something that is like really not that bad like all the other stuff and kind of give them 5%. And they did that. And the fun part is, these 5% that they borrowed from Microsoft VML are the worst of SVG, because it's the set element and the animate element. If you look them up what they do, you will instantly know, oh my god, this is so bad. And it's even that bad that Microsoft's Internet Explorer fully supports SVG, except for these 5%, because they left them out. It's just like they just like said, no, we don't do this. So this is how weird it is. And yeah, VML, it's a good premise, right? Like what could go wrong with VML? Have you heard about vermal frames? Because, of course, vector markup languages need their own iframes, right? And they call them vermal frames. And you have the possibility to inject a vermal frame. Here it is, vermal frame, not sure how you say this. I say vermal frame, you can call it however you want. And you give it a namespace, and you give it a behavior, and you give it an absolute positioning, and then you point it to test VML. The beautiful thing here is that test VML can reside anywhere on evil.com, even if that is injected. So it works across domains, and test VML contains your payload. This, for example, the non-standard XML element with a rectangle and a very big rectangle that is identified with the ID XSS. So here they know each other. And then it has an event. Now you might say, yeah, we could use onload. No, you couldn't, because it only knows onmouse over. It's like the only event that it knows. I don't know why. I think there is one more onmouse out, and that's it. You can't click it. You can mouse over it, but that's pretty much it. You can't load. You can't do anything else. So it's kind of weird. But anyhow, this can come from attacker.com, and this comes on injected or evil or victim.com, and it still works. It fetches the stuff across domains, and the only thing that you need is this particular element that no blacklist ever detects anymore, because people have forgotten that it even exists. So in a concrete exploitation scenario, check the page, find the injection, realize that you can only get weird stuff in, something like this, iframe the page, set it to IE7 mode, inject this thing, store test VML or evil VML on your server, point it to that, and then you have a cross-site scripting on that page that probably no one else can find. So that's quite good and deserves 2 barfing smileys, because it's actually useful in existing real-life situations and penetration tests. Yeah, and now comes the sad part. Like now comes the reason why I hate EML so much, and why all this is that was very disappointing to me. First it was really cool, and I was super proud of myself and shoulder tapped myself and everything. But then I was like, oh no, come on, super unfair. So we talked about the doc modes, right? Like the possibility to tell IE to behave like an older version of itself. Like I wish to have that in real life. And anyway, what a bad joke. And there is one more thing. There is not just the doc modes. There is not just like the IE5 doc mode, IE7 doc mode, IE8, IE9, IE10 doc mode. There is one more thing. And that is very, very special. So doc modes are usually used for sites that are incompatible with modern browsers. So the browsers need to pretend that they're older, and then the site works again. But there's a couple of websites that are so bad and so terrible and written with like really absolutely nothing in mind that they can't even work in the doc modes, because the markup and the features needed by these websites are so ancient and so messed up that it doesn't work anymore. And for those websites who are often seen in internet deployments, Microsoft has a dedicated mode, and that is the compatibility view mode. And this mode is special. You don't just activate it. You don't just go there and activate CV mode. You have to actually be on a list. So if your website is one of these really, really, really bad websites, then you have to write Microsoft and say like, hey guys, I created this really bad website. Can you put me on this list of yours? And if they do so, if they allow that, and of course we did that, and if they allow that, then your website will run in CV mode. Now, how does this all work? Well, basically the CV mode is being activated from an XML file. So when IE starts, and you can see this in the network traffic, when you have a look at the network traffic after starting a fresh instance of IE, it requests an XML file from a Microsoft server, luckily with SSL. And in this XML file, you will find information like this. Basically, this is the view in IE itself. It's like a couple of XML elements, and they contain information like domain, feature switch, something, 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 doc mode, emulate IE10, and then the URL. So if your page is hosted on those domains, and there's 8,000 of them, 8,000, then you will run in CV mode. And in CV mode, you can do special stuff, because in CV mode, you have access to all the features, like everything that is bad. And if you iframe a website that uses the modern doc type, remember at the very beginning of the presentation that this was one of the limitations that appeared not to be so bad, but they are bad, like this thing here, it will still go down to IE5 mode. It will not stop at IE8 mode, so you can, by owning a website on the CV list, bring any page, even the most modern ones, into IE5 mode, notwithstanding of the doc type that is there, and that's kind of useful. So needless to say, we were like, we want to have that. We want to have that power. We want to get on this goddamn list. And how do we do this? So first we thought like, well, if we were actual attackers, then we can just like have a look at these 8,000 domains, find one with cross-site scripting, and do everything from there. Like as an attacker, you would do that because you don't care. However, we're penetration testers, so we can't do this. We can't possibly give the client a report where we use some weird South Korean shop with an XSS to attack them and then leak tons of information and break the law. It's like, no, that's not going to go well. So we're in a weaker position than the attacker because we do have to give a shit. The attacker doesn't. We're like, okay, what do we do? We could social engineering. So I wrote them an email and said like, hey, we have this really bad website. They were like, no, you need to redesign it. Send us screenshots. We also need like company information. It's like, okay, no. So I didn't do this. Then we checked this thing. And I was like, okay, there's 8,000 domains. And I mean, domains have this awesome property of eventually expiring, right? So on GitHub, you will find a script, and you can run this script, and it will just like check frequently whether domains are expiring. So you feed it like a text file with tons of domains, and then you check all of them. And it will tell you, hey, this one expires in 2 weeks. And we found 2 that expired in 2 weeks. We're like, yes! So we checked the websites, and they were definitely defunct. There was nothing on there, so we sniped them. So we just like waited for the right moment, and we grabbed the domains. One of them I still own. The other is owned by File Descriptor. I'm not sure if he still has it. I'm going to tell you what the domain is later on, but keep it for you. Yeah, it's on video. Okay, I'm going to tell you tonight what the domain is when we drink beer. Anyhow, we sniped 2 of these domains, and we were super proud. And we put our payload on there, and we wanted to make sure that Microsoft doesn't notice this and that they don't kind of remove us from the CV list because they kind of see that there's something fishy going on. So I went to archive.org, and I cloned the old website, which was like a shop for some stuff. And it's now like in the original form as it was back then, so it doesn't raise any suspicion. But there's, of course, a small surprise in the web root, and it's called XSS-PHP, where I can set the doc mode via get parameter, and I can set the payload via get parameter, and the XSS filter is switched off, of course, via headers. And I can iframe whomever, whenever, and put them into CV mode because I am in CV mode. But there was a problem. And the problem was that we didn't have a close look at this particular list. We realized that we had those domains, that they were expired, we sniped them, but we didn't realize that there was a problem with these domains. So here you can see that there is like different ways how a website on the CV list can be configured. And we were very unlucky because we grabbed one that is set to IE10 mode. It's like, no, damn it. We need one that is in IE7 mode, not IE10 mode. IE10 mode is not useful to us because we could do this before. We could even go down to IE8 mode before, but not IE10 mode. We want IE7 mode. It's like, yeah, unpleasant. And you have all this, right? Like you kind of went all the extra mile already to do it legally and kind of not to go to jail. And you want to have this domain. You want to have it in IE7 mode. So I again picked the approach of social engineering, and I wrote the CV list team again with a different address. So like, hey, so we have this website from a client, and they want to kind of reboot the website because it's great. But it really doesn't look good. And we found out that it is already on the CV list. The only thing is the flag, because we're still running in IE10 mode, and we've totally found out that if we run in IE7 mode, then everything would be good, and the client is really pressuring us. We need to do this fast. And then they also came at us and said, oh, you're already on the CV list and we don't need to do the verification stuff. Have you tried everything? Are you sure? And it's like, yeah, we tried everything. Like seriously, everything in our power we tried. And we're getting so much pressure from the client. It's like, all right, I'm opening 2 cases for you. We're going to set you to A7. It's like, yes, awesome. And they did it. And they actually did it. And then we looked like this. It's not the domain. I kind of mastered a bit. Then they actually added the flag for us. Whatever, it's topicstock.net. Here it is. You even see the case number here. So this is the one. Have a look at this thing in your CV list that IE fetches when you started, and it's hopefully still there. So we have IE7 status on Windows 10 and on Windows 7, and that's good enough for us. So that worked. And we were like super proud. I was so happy. I was like, yeah, I socially engineered the CV list team. Man, am I good. But then Masato came and said, like, yeah, that was all in vain. It's like, why? I found a different trick where you don't need CV lists. It's like, no, come on. And he found out that you can actually do this with EML. If you have a web server and you put an EML file on that web server, like these things here, where have we been? There we go. Yes. And you put one of these files on the web server, you just call it test.eml and put this stuff in here. And then you create an iframe in this thing, and this iframe points to victim.com. Then it will always run in IE5 mode, the best mode you can ask for. And it's like, great. Awesome. I mean, awesome, but awesome. So, yeah. Could have saved this energy, but maybe they fixed this one day. And maybe if they fix that, and if they unsupport EML, and I can kind of imagine that it's going to happen soon for a couple of reasons, then the topics.net website might be useful again. So let's see. Don't report it to anyone, just like because then it's gone and no one can use it. You can use it now if you want to. I don't mind at all. The file is called XSS.php. You will find it if you look for it. But don't tell the law enforcement or anybody else. Like GData people here? No. Anyhow, so yeah, that was cool and it sucked at the same time. And it's time for a conclusion. So I still think, and I'm deeply convinced that Microsoft Internet Explorer was and is an amazing browser. Like this is an incredible feature mill with like everything in there. I don't have any idea if there is a different browser that has like so many features and so much diversity and so much stuff. I heard, but that's just a rumor, that the MS-HTML DLL sources are a couple of gigabytes and that they have trouble to actually leak this stuff because it's so big you can't get it out of the house. They were going for 10, 15 years and even more with basically saying, screw the standards, let's do whatever. And they did that, and they were successful with that. For a long time, IE was the most predominant, popular browser with like 80% market share or more. Now we have Edge. I don't know what to think about Edge. I think Edge should not yet have been released. Like they should have said, okay, this is still like, I don't know, making baby steps because it's a mess. Have a look at brokenbrowser.com, see what is on there. It's really a mess. Catastrophic in many regards. So this is not a replacement yet. But Microsoft tries to sell it as a replacement, try to kind of register it as the default browser and reminds you every time you use IE, hey, you should use Edge, it's much better. It's like, no, it's not much better, it's much more terrible. So I think MSIE is gonna stick around for quite some time. It's definitely gonna stick around in large corporate deployments, banks, insurances, healthcare, government, and so on. You will find IE8, IE10, IE6 there. One of our clients, I can't say who that is, actually told me on a training event that they were super proud to finally have upgraded to IE8. It's like, what? That was 2015. So it's like, good job. Should I go again? Like, it's not making any sense to be here. So I remember when I was living in the UK for a year that I was gonna open like a company account there, and I went to the bank, and then they opened IE6, and they said like, what's your website? We need to verify your company website. It's like, okay, so I'm standing here, and you're there with IE6 in the bank intranet, and you ask me to tell you a URL that you are supposed to type in? Are you kidding me? So yeah, like IE is still there, and it's not gonna go away anytime soon. So it makes sense to kind of look at these things and still keep track what it's capable of and what kind of tricks there are. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't do any nasty stuff, only do good stuff, of course. And I'm pretty sure that when you do web penetration tests, that you will find a couple of situations where you can actually use one of these injections and turn something that looks unexploitable into something that actually pops the alert or worse. So let's see. Quick shout outs. Generally, MSRC, it sounds like I'm talking, or I like smack talking Microsoft, which is not the case. I really do like IE, and I really do like the people over at MSRC. David Ross was my boss back then when I did the research. He's now with Google. But thanks to him for kind of making this all happen and kind of enabling all this. Then there's Gareth Hayes, who has been speaking here already, I think, at least twice. And he found a lot of stuff as well. Like, he found insane amounts of stuff back then. He's still a grandmaster in doing research. I'm doing admin stuff only, pretty much, but he's like really still in the game. Manuel Caballero, he's the guy behind the brokenbrowser.com blog. And him and Gareth were my teammates back then. So we were Team Tango working for Microsoft, and Dave was our boss, and now it's like all splattered over the world. Then there's File Descriptor, who found a couple of tricks, who's in our team now, and Masato, who's also in our team now. And yeah, he's like the king of XSS. Everybody knows that. So to all these people, there's a lot of thank you. And thank you to you for listening to me. And that's it. Thank you very much.